So what happens when a government tries to destroy the language spoken by up to half of the population of the country it rules? In the case of France in the occitan language, something called vergogno happened. Vergogno is a term in the occitan language that means shame, and it's a term used to describe the intentional destruction of most of France's regional languages. Now, if you didn't know, France used to have many more regional languages other than Standard French. To be fair, some central dialects and others can be described as dialects of French, but however, in many regions of the country, especially in the south, many of these are entirely separate Romance languages. Some, like Basque, Breton, and forms of Dutch and German, are not Romance languages at all. So if you've never heard of occitan, it's a language or grouping of languages spoken in southern France and a little bit in northern Spain. It's also closely related to the Catalan language. During the medieval period, occitan was a celebrated language of song and poetry, and it was spread throughout Europe by many traveling troubadours. Up until about a century ago, occitan was the primary language of most of southern France and about half of France's population. So France's central government had tried to discourage the use of regional languages and dialects since the 1500s, but this became much more forceful after the French Revolution of 1789. The French school system was very central in targeting these regional languages and dialects. Even up until recent times, students who were caught using regional languages in school were often physically beaten. Teachers would smack students on the fingers, force them to wear heavy objects tied around their necks for the rest of the day, and generations of French students in many minority areas were constantly told that their languages were simply impure forms of French and they should be ashamed of speaking them and they should be ashamed of their own families. And while most of these policies have been relaxed in recent decades, the number of people who can still remember stories from their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents of going to school and being shamed and beaten for speaking minority languages is still very high. Occitan, once one of the most artistic and celebrated languages of Europe with millions of native speakers, has been reduced to fewer than 600,000 native speakers. All major varieties and dialects of the occitan language are considered heavily endangered, and the number of native speakers and secondary speakers is rapidly declining. Thankfully, there are many grassroots efforts to counter this.